I'm Melissa, 37, and I still can't believe what my parents did to my daughter Harper. After years of saving every penny for college, my sweet 18-year-old was manipulated into giving her grandparents her entire $42,000 fund for a life-saving surgery. 2 weeks later, I discovered they'd gifted $37,000 to my niece Amber for a new car and European vacation. Harper was devastated. I didn't scream or make threats. I chose calculated justice instead. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe family should never exploit trust. Growing up with Richard and Eleanor Wilson wasn't easy. From an early age, I understood the unspoken hierarchy in our home. My sister Diana was the golden child, beautiful, compliant, and willing to follow our parents' carefully constructed life plan. I was the rebel, the questioner, the one who needed to get her act together. Not that I was a troublemaker by any standard measure. I simply had my own opinions, which my parents interpreted as defiance. When I met Jason in college, it felt like finally finding someone who valued my voice. We married young, too young, looking back, and had Harper when I was just 19. My parents made their disappointment clear, suggesting I had ruined my potential. Diana, meanwhile, was completing her business degree and dating Mark, a man my parents adored from a good family. Jason and I struggled from the beginning. When Harper was 3, he accepted a job across the country, saying he needed space to find himself. The divorce papers arrived 6 months later, along with child support payments that were inconsistent at best. I was suddenly a single mother with a nursing assistant certificate, working multiple shifts while trying to give Harper stability. "You should move back home," my mother suggested during one of our weekly calls, her voice laced with that particular blend of concern and condescension she had mastered. "We can help with Harper while you figure things out." But I knew what moving home would mean, surrendering my independence and subjecting Harper to the same conditional love I had experienced. Instead, I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment near a good elementary school and built our life piece by piece. Diana married Mark shortly after graduation. They settled in a beautiful house just 15 minutes from our parents, and 3 years later welcomed Amber into the world. My parents were ecstatic, immediately embracing the role of doting grandparents. They attended every recital, soccer game, and school event. For Amber, they were the picture-perfect grandparents I had always wished for as a child. With Harper, things were different. They remembered her birthday and Christmas, of course, but there was always a subtle distance. When Harper earned straight A's or won the science fair, my mother would say things like, "That's wonderful, dear. Amber just made the competitive swim team, you know." Despite this, Harper developed into an incredible young woman. Responsible beyond her years, she started babysitting at 12, pet sitting at 14, and working weekends at the local bookstore by 16. Every dollar she earned went into her college fund, which I matched as best I could from my nursing salary. "Mom, I'm going to Stanford or UCLA," she would tell me, her eyes bright with determination. "I just need to save enough so you don't have to worry." Her consideration for our financial situation broke my heart and filled me with pride simultaneously. By her senior year, through scholarships, work, and careful saving, Harper had accumulated just over $42,000 for her education. It wasn't enough for 4 full years at her dream schools, but it was an impressive start. My situation had improved too. After years of night classes, I had finally earned my RN license, nearly doubling my salary. We moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, and for the first time, I could occasionally buy Harper new clothes instead of thrift store finds. Meanwhile, Diana and Mark's life continued its picture-perfect trajectory. Mark became partner at his accounting firm, they upgraded to an even larger home with a pool, and Amber grew into a pretty, popular teenager who seemed to effortlessly achieve everything my parents valued: social status, athletic recognition, and the right kind of friends. Family gatherings became increasingly difficult as the years passed. My parents would fawn over Amber's latest accomplishments while asking Harper polite but perfunctory questions about school. Harper, ever gracious, would engage enthusiastically with her grandparents despite their obvious favoritism. "It's okay, Mom," she told me after one particularly painful Thanksgiving where my father had announced they were taking Amber to Disney World. "Grandma and Grandpa just have more in common with Amber. I don't need expensive trips." Her maturity made the situation even more unfair. Despite everything, Harper maintained a relationship with her grandparents, calling them weekly and helping them with technology issues. She seemed to genuinely care for them, and they appeared to appreciate her, even if their affection paled in comparison to their adoration of Amber. As Harper's senior year progressed, acceptance letters began arriving. UCLA, Berkeley, and even Stanford welcomed her with partial scholarships. The night she received her Stanford acceptance, Harper cried with joy. "We did it, Mom," she said, hugging me tightly. "All those extra shifts and weekends were worth it." I held my brilliant, hardworking daughter and felt a surge of vindication. We had succeeded despite the odds, despite the lack of support, despite my parents' dismissal of our choices. Harper would have opportunities one never did, and she had earned every single one through her own determination. Little did I know that all our careful planning was about to be derailed by the people who should have been cheering the loudest for Harper's success. March was a month of celebration in our apartment. College acceptance letters continued to arrive, each one confirming what I already knew: Harper was exceptional. The partial scholarship from Stanford was particularly thrilling, though even with financial aid, we would still need loans to cover the full cost. "I can work part-time during the school year," Harper said as we reviewed the numbers at our kitchen table. "And full-time during summers." "I don't mind." "Let's not worry about that yet," I told her. "You've saved so much already. Let's enjoy this moment." That evening, as Harper was preparing dinner, her phone rang. She answered with a smile that quickly faded into concern. "Grandpa? What's wrong?" "Slow down." She moved to the living room, her voice dropping to a worried murmur. When she returned 20 minutes later, her face was pale. "Mom, Grandpa needs surgery." "Something with his heart." He was crying. Harper rarely saw her stoic grandfather display emotion, so his tears had clearly rattled her. "What?" "He hasn't mentioned any health problems," I said, immediately suspicious. "My father had used convenient emergencies before when he wanted something. It's sudden." They just got the test results back. "The surgery costs $45,000, and their insurance won't cover it because it's some experimental procedure." "They might lose the house, Mom." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the sensation that always accompanied my parents' manipulations. "Did they ask you for money, Harper?" She hesitated. "Not directly. Grandpa just said they don't know what they're going to do, that they're desperate." "Mom, they helped us when I was little. Remember when they paid for my braces?" The braces they had held over our heads for years, despite the fact that Diana and Mark's family vacations cost far more. "Harper, your college fund is for your future. If they're in trouble, I can help them figure out payment plans or—" "I already told Grandpa I would help," she interrupted, her voice small but determined. "It's his heart, Mom. What if he dies because I wanted to go to a fancy school? I can take out loans or go to community college for 2 years. People do it all the time." I wanted to call my father immediately and demand to know what kind of person manipulates their teenage granddaughter. But I also recognized that Harper was 18 legally an adult, and this was her money. More importantly, this was a defining moment in her relationship with her grandparents. If I intervened too forcefully, I risked becoming the villain in their narrative. "Let me talk to them first," I suggested. "Maybe we can split the cost or—" "They need the money this week for the pre-surgical appointment," Harper said. Grandpa said any delay could be dangerous. The convenient urgency was another red flag, but Harper was already making the bank transfer arrangements on her laptop. She had worked so hard for this money, had sacrificed normal teenage experiences to save it, and now she was giving it away based on a tearful phone call. The next day, we drove to my parents' house with a cashier's check. My mother answered the door in her gardening clothes, looking perfectly healthy and untroubled. When she saw us, her expression shifted to something appropriately somber. "Oh, Harper, you angel," she said, embracing my daughter while shooting me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Your grandfather is resting, but this will mean everything to him." I scanned the living room for any signs of medical documents or distress, but saw only the usual immaculate space. "Which hospital is doing the procedure?" I asked casually. My mother waved dismissively. "That specialist group near the university. Richard has all the details." When my father emerged from his study, he moved with the same vigor he always had. No signs of a man facing a life-threatening heart condition. He became appropriately emotional when Harper handed him the check, promising to pay her back as soon as possible. "We're just so blessed to have such a generous granddaughter," he said, patting Harper's hand. "This is a loan, not a gift. We'll make it right." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. I'd heard these promises before, usually before disappointment. As we left, Harper seemed lighter, as if the act of helping her grandparents had brought her genuine joy despite the sacrifice. Over the next weeks, she researched community colleges and additional scholarship opportunities with the same determination she'd applied to saving for Stanford. "It's just a detour, not a cancellation," she told me cheerfully. "I'll transfer after 2 years." I helped her explore options while trying to ignore the nagging worry about my parents' sudden urgent need. They didn't call to update us on the surgery date or procedure details. When Harper called them, they changed the subject to Amber's upcoming graduation. Then came the strange social media posts. My mother, who rarely used Facebook, shared photos of a shopping trip with Diana and Amber. One image showed Amber posing beside a brand new Audi convertible with a large red bow. "Congratulations to our amazing granddaughter on her graduation. Enjoy your dream car and European adventure. So proud of your accomplishments." Read the caption. Harper saw the post too. "Wow, Amber got a car for graduation. That's really generous of Uncle Mark and Aunt Diana." I nodded, uncomfortable with the timing, but not yet connecting the dots. "Your cousin has always had everything handed to her." "Mom," Harper chided gently. "Don't be that way. Amber's nice, just different from us." Her generosity of spirit made what happened next even more painful. 3 weeks after Harper had transferred her college fund, I ran into Diana at Northridge Mall. I'd stopped to pick up additional nursing scrubs during my lunch break when I spotted her outside the Nordstrom entrance, laden with shopping bags. "Melissa," she called, waving enthusiastically. Diana and I maintained a cordial relationship despite our differences. "I haven't seen you since Easter. How's Harper? Getting ready for college?" The question stung, given recent events. "She's considering community college now, actually." "Financial considerations." Diana looked genuinely confused. "Really? I thought she got into Stanford." "That's what Mom and Dad said." "She did, but plans change." I didn't want to discuss my parents' health issues without their permission, even with Diana. "Well, community college is practical," Diana said with the easy dismissal of someone who'd never had to make such compromises. "Amber's so excited about UCLA. Mom and Dad's gift made everything perfect." "Gift?" I echoed, something cold settling in my stomach. "The graduation present. They gave her $37,000. Can you believe it? She got the Audi she wanted, and we're using the rest for her graduation trip to Europe. 3 weeks in France, Italy, and Greece. First class all the way." Diana's eyes shone with pride. Mom and Dad said they wanted to invest in her future experiences. The world tilted sideways. $37,000. Almost the exact amount Harper had given them for a supposedly life-saving surgery, now funding my niece's luxury car and European vacation. When did they decide on this gift? I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. Oh, months ago. They've been planning it since Christmas. They wanted it to be special since she's their only granddaughter going straight to a university. Diana must have noticed something in my expression because she quickly added, I mean, their only granddaughter graduating this year. I excused myself, claiming a work emergency, and barely made it to my car before the tears came. Not sad tears, furious ones. They had deliberately manipulated Harper, inventing a medical crisis to redirect her college fund to their favored granddaughter. The careful planning, the tearful phone call, the promises of repayment, all an elaborate deception targeting a trusting teenager. My hands shook as I called my father. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding irritated at the interruption. Richard Wilson speaking. How was the surgery? I asked without preamble. A pause. What surgery? The life-saving heart procedure Harper gave you her college fund for. The one that was so urgent you needed $42,000 immediately. Another, longer pause. Melissa, I don't know what you're talking about. Stop lying. I just saw Diana. I know about Amber's $37,000 graduation gift, the car, and European vacation. What happened to the surgery? Miraculous recovery the moment Harper's money hit your account. My father's tone turned cold. That money was a gift from Harper to us. What we choose to do with our money is none of your business. You told her it was for medical expenses. You said you might lose your house. Harper needs to learn generosity. She was becoming materialistic with all that college talk. Amber has worked just as hard and deserves recognition. The casual cruelty took my breath away. Amber has never worked a day in her life. Harper has been saving since she was 12 years old. Community college will be good for Harper's character, my father replied dismissively. She's always been too ambitious for her own good. Just like you. I hung up before saying something unforgivable. For several minutes, I sat in my car, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. This wasn't just about money. It was about intentionally derailing Harper's future and crushing her spirit. Telling Harper was the hardest conversation of my life. I waited until evening when we were both home and asked her to sit with me in the living room. Sweetheart, there's something I need to tell you about Grandpa's surgery. Her face immediately filled with concern. Is he okay? Did something happen? There was never any surgery, Harper. I took her hands in mine. I ran into Aunt Diana today. Your grandparents gave Amber $37,000 for graduation, a car, and a trip to Europe. They've been planning it for months. Harper's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to devastation in the span of seconds. But Grandpa was crying. He said he might die without the procedure. They lied to you. They took your college fund knowing exactly what they were doing. Harper pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe they were going to use Amber's gift money for the surgery but then found another way to pay for it. Even now, she was trying to find an explanation that wouldn't make her grandparents monsters. I showed her Diana's social media posts, the timestamps proving the vacation had been booked before they'd asked for money, the captions about planning Amber's dream graduation gift for months. Call them, I suggested quietly. Ask them directly. Harper's hands trembled as she dialed her grandfather's number and put the call on speaker. When he answered, she asked simply, Grandpa, how are you feeling after the surgery? The long silence that followed was damning. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Harper, you need to understand that adults sometimes make complicated decisions for the greater good. Was there ever a surgery? Harper's voice was barely audible. The money you gave us is being put to good use in the family. Amber has worked hard and... Harper ended the call, set down her phone with unnatural precision, and walked silently to her bedroom. I found her there minutes later, staring blankly at her Stanford acceptance letter. For years, she whispered. For years of double shifts and no social life. I didn't go to prom because I picked up an extra babysitting job that night. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. All for nothing. I sat beside her, pulling her into my arms as she finally broke down. Harper cried until she had no tears left, her body shaking with 4 years of deferred teenage experiences and crushed dreams. That night, I heard her through the wall at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., restless and awake. The next morning, her eyes were swollen, but her expression had hardened into something I'd never seen before. "I want to call them," she announced over breakfast. "I want to hear them explain it to me." I nodded, respecting her need for closure. Harper made the call from our kitchen table, her spine straight and voice remarkably steady as she asked her grandparents to explain their actions. "You've always been taken care of," my mother said dismissively. "Amber needed this opportunity more than you needed an overpriced education." "I earned that money myself," Harper countered. "Every dollar." "And now you've learned an important lesson about priorities," my father interjected. "Family comes first, not selfish ambitions." When Harper hung up, she looked at me with clear eyes. "They don't see anything wrong with what they did. They really believe Amber deserves my money more than I do." In that moment, I saw my daughter's innocence die, her belief that family meant unconditional love and support. What replaced it was a painful wisdom no 18-year-old should have to acquire. A week after our discovery, my mother called to inform us that they were hosting a graduation dinner for Amber and the whole family should attend. The implied command was clear: we were expected to show up and pretend nothing had happened. "We're not going," I told Harper immediately after hanging up. "Actually, I think we should," she replied, surprising me. "I want to see them face to face. I need that." I recognized the determination in her expression, the same look she'd had when tackling difficult exams or working extra hours. This was something she needed for closure, so I reluctantly agreed. The evening of Amber's celebration, we arrived at my parents' house precisely on time. Diana, Mark, and Amber were already there, along with my parents' closest friends, the Johnsons and the Garcias. The dining room gleamed with my mother's best china and crystal, a spread of expensive foods decorating the table. "There she is, the graduate," my mother exclaimed as Amber entered from the kitchen, pointedly ignoring our arrival. Amber looked beautiful in a new dress that probably cost more than Harper's entire wardrobe. "Where are you going to college again, Harper?" Mrs. Johnson asked kindly during the appetizer course. Before Harper could answer, my father interjected, "Harper's taking a more practical route. Community college is really more her speed." Harper's knuckles whitened around her water glass, but her voice remained steady. "Actually, I was accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship." But sensibly reconsidered, my mother added with a thin smile, "Not everyone needs an expensive education to be content." Throughout dinner, my parents showcased large photos of Amber's new Audi and itinerary for her European tour. Diana beamed with pride, while Mark occasionally shot uncomfortable glances in our direction. 3 weeks in Europe's finest hotels, my father announced. Nothing but the best for our graduate. First-class flights, private tours of the Louvre. "That sounds expensive," Mrs. Garcia commented. "Worth every penny," my mother replied. "An investment in Amber's future." These are the experiences that shape successful young people. Harper excused herself to use the bathroom. When she didn't return after 10 minutes, I found her in the guest bedroom, sitting perfectly still on the edge of the bed. "I can't do this," she whispered. "They're flaunting it, Mom." My future paid for her vacation. I took her hand. "We can leave right now." She nodded, wiping away a single tear. We returned to the dining room where dessert was being served, an elaborate cake decorated with "Congratulations, Amber" and UCLA bound in purple icing. "We need to head out," I announced, helping Harper with her jacket. "Before cake?" "That's rude," my mother chided. "Speaking of rude," I replied, unable to contain myself any longer, "I think stealing your granddaughter's college fund through deliberate deception qualifies." The room went silent. The Johnsons and Garcias exchanged confused glances. Melissa, this is hardly the time or place, my father warned. When would be a good time to discuss how you invented a fake heart surgery to trick Harper out of her life savings? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Should we schedule that conversation for after Amber returns from spending Harper's money in Paris? Diana gasped. Dad said that money was a gift from Harper. It wasn't a gift, Harper said, finding her voice. They told me Grandpa needed emergency heart surgery or he might die. They said they might lose their house. I believe them. The Garcias looked horrified. Mr. Johnson, who I remembered was on the church board with my father, frowned deeply. Richard, is this true? He asked. My father's face flushed with anger. We're teaching Harper about generosity. She was becoming too focused on material success. By lying to her? Mrs. Garcia asked incredulously. Sometimes parents and grandparents need to make difficult decisions for the greater good, my mother interjected smoothly. Harper will be fine. She can work her way up like Melissa did. You mean struggle unnecessarily for years because her own family sabotaged her? I countered. Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. Wait, you told Harper you needed money for surgery? That's why she gave you her college fund. My mother patted Amber's hand. Don't worry about it, dear. Harper needed to learn that life isn't always fair. This way, you get the graduation you deserve, and she learns an important lesson about priorities. And what lesson is that? I asked. That family will exploit your kindness? That generosity gets punished? That her dreams matter less than Amber's vacation photos? You're being dramatic, my father dismissed. Harper can still go to college, just not her first choice. Sometimes we need to sacrifice for family. Like you're sacrificing? Harper asked quietly. What exactly are you giving up in this scenario, Grandpa? We've supported this family for years, he blustered. Your braces, Christmas gifts. I worked for that money, Harper interrupted, her voice stronger now. Every weekend and summer since I was 12 years old. I gave it to you because I thought you might die. And you took it knowing exactly what it meant to me. My mother's expression hardened. You're being selfish, Harper. Amber has worked just as hard. At what? I interjected. What job has Amber ever had? Amber herself looked increasingly uncomfortable. I didn't know, Aunt Melissa. I swear I didn't know the money was Harper's. Of course it wasn't Harper's money anymore, my father stated firmly. She gave it to us and we chose to invest it in Amber's future. The discussion is closed. Harper took a deep breath and looked directly at her grandparents. You're right about one thing. This discussion is closed. So is our relationship. I hope Amber enjoys Europe. She turned and walked out of the dining room with more dignity than most adults could muster. I followed, pausing only to address the stunned room one last time. You didn't just steal money. You stole her trust and her opportunity. That's something no amount of money can repay. In the car, Harper broke down again, sobs racking her body. They're not even sorry, Mom. They genuinely believe they did nothing wrong. I held my daughter as she cried, making her a silent promise. This wasn't over. Richard and Eleanor Wilson had finally gone too far, and I would make sure they faced consequences for the first time in their privileged lives. The morning after Amber's graduation dinner, Harper slept late, exhaustion from emotional trauma finally catching up with her. I used the quiet hours to begin formulating a plan, starting with research. By the time Harper emerged from her room, I had compiled a list of local attorneys specializing in elder financial abuse cases. Though this situation was somewhat reversed, the older generation taking advantage of the younger, the legal principles might still apply. What are you doing? Harper asked, pouring herself coffee. Looking into our options, I replied, showing her my notes. What they did was illegal, Harper. It was fraud and financial exploitation. Harper examined the papers silently. I don't know if I want to sue my grandparents. I understand that, I assured her. But we should at least know what our options are. Would you be willing to talk to a lawyer? Just a consultation. She nodded slowly. Okay. just to know where we stand. 2 days later, we sat in the office of Grace Taylor, an attorney recommended by one of the doctors I worked with. Grace listened attentively as Harper explained the situation, the fake medical emergency, the transfer of funds, the subsequent discovery of the deception. "This is a clear case of fraud," Grace confirmed when Harper finished. "They knowingly misrepresented facts to induce you to give them money. The fact that their family actually makes it worse from a legal perspective. What are our options?" I asked. "We can send a formal demand letter requesting return of the full amount plus interest. If they refuse, we can file a civil lawsuit. Given the clear deception involved, I believe we'd have a strong case." "Would it go to court?" Harper asked, looking worried. "It could, but most cases like this settle before trial. No one wants their reputation damaged by public proceedings," Grace explained. "Especially if your grandparents have standing in the community." We left with a tentative plan. Grace would draft a formal demand letter giving my parents 10 days to return Harper's money with interest. Before we send it, I told Harper that evening, "We need to be clear about what outcome you want. Is it just the money, or do you need some kind of acknowledgement from them?" Harper considered this carefully. "I want my college fund back. But I also want them to understand what they did was wrong. Not just legally wrong, but morally wrong. That second part might be harder to achieve," I warned her. "I know, but I need to try." Over the next week, we gathered documentation, bank transfer records, text messages, voicemails from my father mentioning the urgent medical situation, and screenshots of social media posts about Amber's pre-planned gifts. Grace incorporated all of this into a comprehensive demand letter. While waiting for the letter to be finalized, I made a difficult decision. I began quietly reaching out to people in my parents' social circle, church members, longtime friends, and neighbors. I didn't broadcast the situation, but when people asked about Harper's college plans, I told the truth. Unfortunately, Harper had to give up her Stanford acceptance. My parents convinced her to give them her college fund for emergency heart surgery, but then used the money to buy Amber a car and European vacation instead. The reactions were universally shocked. Mr. Johnson from the church board called me directly. "Melissa, I've known your parents for 20 years. Are you certain about these allegations? Ask them yourself," I suggested. "Ask about Harper's college fund and where the money for Amber's gifts came from." Similar conversations happened throughout their community. I wasn't trying to create a smear campaign. I was simply stating facts and letting others draw their own conclusions. One unexpected ally emerged. Stephanie Collins, my mother's bridge partner for over a decade. She called me after hearing about the situation from another church member. "Your mother did something similar to my nephew years ago," Stephanie revealed. "Borrowed money for a supposed medical treatment for your father, then bought a timeshare in Florida. We never said anything because we were embarrassed." Stephanie agreed to provide a written statement about the previous incident, strengthening our case about a pattern of behavior. When Grace's letter was ready, Harper read it carefully before signing. The demands were straightforward: return of the $42,000 plus 10% interest within 10 days, or face legal action and potential criminal charges for fraud. "Are you sure about this?" I asked as she handed back the signed document. "Yes," Harper said firmly. "Even if they never acknowledge what they did was wrong, at least they won't get away with it." The letter was delivered by courier the following day. My mother called within hours, her voice shrill with indignation. "How dare you threaten legal action against your own parents? After everything we've done for you and Harper." "This isn't a threat, Mom. It's a consequence. You committed fraud. We did no such thing. Harper gave us that money freely, under false pretenses. You lied about needing surgery." "We never specifically said the money was for surgery," my mother argued, attempting to rewrite history. Harper assumed that. "We have the voicemails, Mom. Dad explicitly said he needed the money for a life-saving procedure." There was a brief silence before my mother switched tactics. "You've always been jealous of your sister. This is just another attempt to create family drama because you can't stand to see Amber succeed. Return the money, and this ends quietly, I replied, refusing to engage with her manipulation. Otherwise, we proceed with legal action and everyone in your community will know exactly what you did. You wouldn't dare. 10 days, Mom. That's how long you have to make this right. After hanging up, I received a barrage of angry calls and texts from Diana, accusing me of trying to ruin Amber's graduation celebration and threatening to cut me off from the family permanently. Diana, this isn't about you or Amber, I tried to explain. This is about Mom and Dad manipulating Harper. They were trying to help Amber. Family helps family. Harper is family too. They stole her future. You're being dramatic. Harper can still go to community college. The circular conversations were exhausting. No one on that side of the family seemed capable of acknowledging the fundamental wrong that had been committed. Meanwhile, Harper struggled with anxiety as we waited. What if they don't pay? What if we have to go to court, she worried. Then we go to court, I assured her. But remember what Grace said, they probably won't want this to become public. The waiting was difficult. Harper jumped every time her phone rang, hoping for an apology that never came. Instead, my parents attempted counter-manipulation, having family friends call to pressure Harper into withdrawing the demand. Your grandparents are devastated, reported Mrs. Garcia, who had been at the dinner. They never meant to hurt you. Then they can return my college fund, Harper replied simply. As the deadline approached, my friend Rachel became our rock, bringing dinner when we were too emotionally exhausted to cook and offering Harper encouragement. Whatever happens, you've stood up for yourself, she reminded Harper. That takes tremendous courage. The night before the deadline, Harper couldn't sleep. I found her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., making tea with shaking hands. What if this tears the family apart forever? She asked quietly. I sat beside her, choosing my words carefully. Sweetheart, they already did that when they betrayed your trust. All we're doing is refusing to pretend it didn't happen. She nodded slowly. I know. I just never thought it would come to this. Neither had I. But as I held my daughter's hand across our small kitchen table, I knew we were doing the right thing, not just for Harper's college fund, but for her sense of self-worth and justice. On the morning of the deadline, a courier arrived at our apartment. Harper and I exchanged nervous glances as I signed for the envelope, which felt too thin to contain a check. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter from my father's personal attorney, Franklin Reed. My clients, Richard and Eleanor Wilson, categorically deny all allegations of fraud or misrepresentation. The funds in question were gifted voluntarily by Harper Wilson with no conditions attached. However, to avoid unnecessary family conflict and potential legal expenses, the Wilsons are willing to consider a partial repayment of $15,000 to be paid in monthly installments over 5 years, contingent upon the signing of a non-disclosure agreement and waiver of all further claims. Harper's face fell as I read the letter aloud. They're still not admitting they did anything wrong, and they're offering less than half of what they took, I added, anger rising. With ridiculous conditions attached. I immediately called Grace, who was unsurprised by the response. This is fairly typical. They're testing your resolve, seeing if you'll accept a lesser amount to avoid conflict. What do we do now? We proceed as planned. I'll file the lawsuit this afternoon and arrange for them to be served tomorrow. True to her word, Grace prepared the necessary documents. The following day, my parents were served with papers at their home by a professional process server, a woman named Vanessa who later described my mother's face as absolutely priceless when she realized what the documents were. The phone calls began almost immediately. First my father, blustering about ungrateful children and frivolous lawsuits. Then my mother, switching between tears and threats with practiced ease. Diana called next, screaming that I was destroying the family. Through it all, Harper remained surprisingly calm. They still don't get it, do they? She observed after I hung up on Diana. They really believe they had the right to take my money. People like my parents rarely believe rules apply to them, I explained. They're used to getting their way. The next development came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, Amber showed up at our apartment unannounced, looking uncomfortable and clutching her designer purse. "Can I talk to Harper?" she asked when I opened the door. "Privately." I glanced at Harper, who nodded her consent. "I'll be in my bedroom if you need me," I told her, giving the girls space, but leaving the door open so I could intervene if necessary. From what Harper told me later, the conversation was illuminating. Amber had only recently learned the full extent of the deception. "I knew they were giving me money for graduation," she admitted to Harper. "But they told me it was from their retirement fund because they wanted to invest in my future. I had no idea it was your college savings." "Would it have mattered if you knew?" Harper asked. Amber looked down. "I'd like to think so. I'm not a bad person, Harper. Spoiled maybe, but I wouldn't deliberately take your future away." According to Harper, Amber seemed genuinely distressed. "The car and trip feel tainted now. Mom and Dad are furious about the lawsuit. They keep saying Grandma and Grandpa were just being generous to me and you're being selfish." "Do you believe that?" Harper had asked. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Amber replied. "But I do know that if someone lied to get money from me, I'd be upset too." Before leaving, Amber hugged Harper awkwardly. "I'm sorry this happened. I really am." The visit left Harper thoughtful. "She's a product of her environment, just like we are," she observed. "The difference is we had to learn self-reliance, while she learned entitlement." A week after serving the lawsuit, we received another communication. This time a request for a private meeting from my father. He suggested neutral territory, the office of family friend and mediator, Thomas Walker. Grace advised caution but thought the meeting might be productive. "Take me with you," she suggested. "Let's hear what they have to say." The meeting was set for the following Saturday. Harper decided to attend, wanting to face her grandparents directly. We arrived at Thomas's office to find my parents already seated, looking grim. My father's lawyer, Franklin Reed, sat beside them. Diana and Mark were conspicuously absent. "Thank you for agreeing to this discussion," Thomas began formally. "I hope we can resolve this situation amicably." My father cleared his throat. "This lawsuit is unnecessary and hurtful. We're family. Families don't sue each other. Families also don't defraud each other," Grace countered smoothly. "Your honor student granddaughter worked for years to save for college. You invented a medical emergency to take that money, then spent it on luxury items for another grandchild. Those are the facts." Harper gave us that money voluntarily, my mother insisted. "Under false pretenses," I interjected. "That's the definition of fraud." "We always intended to help Harper with college eventually," my father claimed. "Just not that overpriced California school." Harper, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. When were you planning to help me? After I gave up on my dreams? After I settled for less than I earned?" My parents exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for direct questioning from Harper. "Your aunt and uncle couldn't afford the gifts Amber deserved," my mother explained, as if this justified everything. "We were balancing the needs of the family." "By stealing from me?" Harper asked. "How is that balance?" Franklin attempted to redirect. "The Wilsons are prepared to increase their offer to $25,000, payable immediately, with the same conditions regarding non-disclosure." Grace shook her head. "Our demand remains unchanged. Full restitution of $42,000 plus 10% interest and legal fees." "That's ridiculous," my father exploded. "We don't have that kind of money lying around anymore." "Then you shouldn't have spent Harper's college fund on Amber's car and vacation," I replied calmly. "You created this situation. You can fix it." "By selling the car," Harper suggested. "Canceling the Europe trip. The same way I would have had to sacrifice if I needed money." My parents looked genuinely shocked by the suggestion. "We can't do that to Amber," my mother protested. It would break her heart. Like breaking Harper's heart mattered to you? I asked. The meeting continued in circles for another hour, with my parents alternating between minimizing their actions and blaming Harper and me for being difficult. Eventually, Thomas called for a break. In the hallway, Grace pulled us aside. They're starting to realize this won't go away. The fact that they've increased their offer shows they're concerned. Should we consider it? Harper asked, looking tired. That's entirely your decision, Grace replied. But remember, if we go to court, this becomes public record. From what I've seen of your grandparents, their reputation in the community matters greatly to them. Harper thought for a moment. I want what's fair. All of my money back. They can figure out how to make that happen. When we reconvened, Grace presented our position once more. My client's terms remain unchanged. Full restitution within 7 days, or we proceed to court. My father leaned forward, his expression hard. You realize this means you'll never be welcome in our home again? Either of you. Harper met his gaze steadily. I realized that the moment I discovered you lied to me about needing life-saving surgery, Grandpa. Something in her quiet dignity seemed to finally penetrate. For just a moment, my father looked ashamed before his expression hardened again. We'll need time to consider our options, Franklin stated formally. 7 days, Grace repeated. After that, we proceed to court and file for discovery, including complete financial records for the past 5 years. The threat of financial disclosure clearly disturbed my parents, who had always been secretive about money. We left the meeting without resolution, but with a sense that the power dynamic had shifted. What happens now? Harper asked as we drove home. We wait, I told her. But from their reaction to the financial disclosure threat, I think they'll pay. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. Diana called several times, alternating between pleading and threatening. Mom and Dad might have to take out a second mortgage because of you, she accused. Are you happy now? They chose to spend Harper's money on Amber's luxuries, I reminded her. Those were their decisions, not ours. On the 6th day, Thomas called. The Wilsons have agreed to pay the full amount plus interest, he informed us. They want to deliver the check in person. Grace advised against a private meeting. Have them deliver the check to my office. I'll verify it before you have any further contact. The following morning, a cashier's check for $46,200 was delivered to Grace's office, along with a brief note. This payment is made without admission of wrongdoing, solely to preserve family harmony. We expect this matter to remain private within the family. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just financial restitution without emotional accountability. When Grace called to confirm the check had cleared, Harper sat quietly for a long time. It doesn't feel like victory, she finally said. It's not, I agreed, putting my arm around her shoulders. But it is justice. You stood up for yourself, and they faced consequences for their actions. That's something. Harper nodded slowly. I guess I was hoping they'd finally see me, really see me, and understand what they did. But they still think they were right. Some people never admit they're wrong, sweetheart. Especially people like my parents. That night, I found Harper looking at her Stanford acceptance letter again, but this time with a small smile. I called the admissions office today, she told me. They said I can still attend in the fall if I confirm by next week. For the first time in months, I saw genuine hope in my daughter's eyes. The money couldn't heal the emotional wounds, but it could still fulfill its original purpose, giving Harper the future she had worked so hard to secure. With Harper's college fund restored and her Stanford acceptance reconfirmed, we began rebuilding what my parents had nearly destroyed. Harper threw herself into preparations for university life with renewed determination, though the emotional scars remained. I keep checking my bank account, she admitted one evening as we shopped for dorm essentials. I'm afraid the money will disappear again. It won't, I assured her. It's secure now. I know that logically. It's just hard to trust again. Trust was the casualty that concerned me most. Harper had always been an optimistic person who believed in people's basic goodness. The betrayal by her grandparents had fundamentally shaken that worldview. 2 weeks after receiving the check, we were surprised by another unexpected visitor, Diana. She arrived looking uncharacteristically subdued, without her usual polished appearance. "Can we talk?" she asked when I opened the door. Harper was out with friends, so Diana and I sat in our small living room, the tension palpable between us. Mom and Dad had to take money from their retirement account to repay Harper, she began, clearly expecting sympathy. "That was their choice," I replied evenly. "They could have sold the car they bought Amber or canceled the European trip." Diana flinched. "Amber offered to do that, actually. She told them to sell the car and give the money back to Harper." This surprised me. What did they say? That it wasn't her responsibility to fix this, that they'd handle it. Diana twisted her wedding ring nervously. "Mark and we've been talking about patterns we've never questioned before." "What patterns?" "The favoritism. The manipulation. The way Mom and Dad have always pitted us against each other." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I always thought I was the lucky one, being the favorite. But watching this situation unfold, maybe I was just the one being controlled more effectively." It was perhaps the most honest conversation Diana and I had ever had. For the first time, she seemed to be seeing our parents clearly not as the perfect, generous people they presented themselves to be, but as manipulative individuals who used money and affection as tools of control. "They've already started talking about helping Amber buy a house after college," Diana confessed. "I used to be grateful, but now I wonder what strings will be attached." "There are always strings with them," I confirmed. "That's why I kept my distance all these years. I didn't want Harper raised under their influence." "You were right," Diana admitted reluctantly. "I just couldn't see it." Before leaving, Diana asked if Harper would be willing to talk with Amber. "She feels terrible about everything. She didn't know where the money was coming from." "That's up to Harper," I told her. "I won't pressure her either way." When I related the conversation to Harper that evening, she considered it thoughtfully. "I believe Amber didn't know," she said finally. "And it's not really her fault that Grandma and Grandpa played favorites." The following weekend, Harper agreed to meet Amber at a coffee shop. She returned looking contemplative. "How did it go?" I asked. "Better than expected." Amber apologized, like really apologized. She said she's been thinking about all the times Grandma and Grandpa gave her things while ignoring me, and she feels awful for never noticing. "That's mature of her." Harper nodded. "She's canceled her Europe trip. Said she couldn't enjoy it knowing how it was supposed to be funded. She's taking a job as a receptionist instead." Wow, that's a big change for Amber. "I think this situation has been a wake-up call for a lot of people," Harper observed, including me. As the weeks passed, Harper processed her experience in thoughtful ways. She wrote a detailed journal entry about the importance of financial independence and the danger of manipulation disguised as love. When her friend Zoe faced pressure from relatives wanting to borrow her graduation money, Harper helped her set boundaries. "The most important thing I learned," she told Zoe, "is that real love doesn't take away your dreams. It helps you achieve them." My parents made no attempt to contact us directly. Through Diana, I heard they were telling friends that we had extorted money from them and were now refusing contact out of spite. Their narrative conveniently omitted the fraudulent means by which they had obtained Harper's money in the first place. Harper decided to send them one final letter before leaving for college. She showed it to me before sending it, a thoughtful, mature message that broke my heart with its wisdom. "Dear Grandma and Grandpa," she wrote, "I'm writing not to continue conflict, but to find closure. What hurt most wasn't the money, but the knowledge that you valued my future so little. I trusted you completely. That trust was sacred to me, and you betrayed it for something as trivial as a car and vacation. I don't expect you to understand how deeply your actions hurt me. I don't even expect an apology anymore. But I want you to know that despite everything, I've learned valuable lessons from this experience. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by others' validation. I've learned that standing up for myself isn't selfish. Most importantly, I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or continued vulnerability. I forgive you not for your benefit, but for mine. I won't carry anger or resentment to Stanford with me. However, forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you again or want to resume our previous relationship. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. I wish you well, but I need to protect my boundaries and my heart. Perhaps someday, if you can truly acknowledge what you did, we might build a new, more honest relationship. Until then, I need to focus on my future, the future I worked for and fought to preserve. She signed it simply Harper and mailed it the next day. No response ever came. August arrived quickly, bringing the day we would drive to Stanford. As we packed the car with Harper's belongings, I felt overwhelming pride in my daughter's resilience. She had faced betrayal by people who should have protected her, fought for justice against significant opposition, and emerged stronger. "Are you ready?" I asked as we prepared to leave our apartment. Harper looked around at the home we had shared, her expression thoughtful. "I think so. Not just for college, but for whatever comes next." "I'm so proud of you, Harper. Not just for getting into Stanford, but for how you handled everything these past months. You showed incredible strength and dignity." "I had a good example," she replied, hugging me tightly. "You never let anyone determine your worth, Mom. You taught me to stand up for myself by showing me how it's done." As we drove across state lines toward California, Harper was quiet for a long time before saying, "I've been thinking about what I learned from all this." "What's that?" "That family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands by you when it matters, who sees your value and respects your dreams." She looked at me with a smile. "By that definition, you're my only real family. And that's enough." It wasn't the happy ending I had once imagined for Harper's relationship with her grandparents. There was no tearful reconciliation, no profound realization on my parents' part about the harm they had caused. But there was something perhaps more valuable, Harper's understanding of her own worth and her right to be treated with respect. 3 months into her first semester, Harper called with excitement about her classes and new friends. "I had dinner with Amber last weekend," she mentioned casually. "She drove down to visit." "How was that?" "Good, actually. She's different now, working part-time, paying for her own things. She said Diana and Mark have started setting more boundaries with Grandma and Grandpa too." Perhaps that was the most unexpected outcome of all, the ripple effect of Harper's stand for justice, slowly transforming dynamics throughout the family. Today, Harper is thriving at Stanford, majoring in psychology with plans to become a counselor specializing in family trauma. "I want to help other people recognize manipulation and set healthy boundaries," she tells me. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand firm against those who would diminish you." As for my parents, they continue their lives much as before, though their social circle has notably contracted since the truth about their actions emerged. Diana tells me they rarely mention Harper or me, as if erasing us helps them avoid confronting their behavior. The path to healing isn't always the one we expect. Sometimes it doesn't involve reconciliation, but rather the courage to walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with family. Harper's journey taught both of us that sometimes love means letting go, and that our worth isn't determined by those who can't see our value. If you're facing a similar situation with family members who manipulate, exploit, or disrespect your boundaries, remember Harper's hard-won wisdom. True love lifts you up. It doesn't tear you down. You deserve people in your life who celebrate your dreams rather than sabotage them. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for listening to our journey, and may you find the strength to protect your own worth, just as Harper did.